Hey guys, Hein from ASI Solutions. So we've got OpenAI working now in our .NET environment. Today we're going to look at how we get these little citations that you can see popping up on the screen. So stay tuned and let's get cracking. Okay, so we're starting off in Azure AI Studio today. Last time we were here, we got some information about how to connect to our Azure OpenAI instance, and we've got the ability to go and pick our deployment. What we're going to look at today, however, is adding our own data. Now, we're doing this to quickly show you guys what happens in the back before we jump straight into code. So yeah, I'm going to go to add data, and then I get to pick quite a few options. This list is growing. When we started initially, it was just blob search or blob storage and AI search, so that's quite impressive. So I'm going to pick Azure AI Search today. We're not going to go into too much detail around what Cosmos DB looks like today or how do we set up Azure Cognitive Search. We'll do those in future videos. I want us to keep focus on just connecting our chatbot from last time to Azure Cognitive Search. So what the UI has done for us, it's basically picked a subscription and it's automatically picked up an Azure AI service that I've set up previously. And it allows us to go and pick an index. Right? I'm going to pick policies for today and acknowledge that there might be some additional cost because we are consuming Azure Cognitive Search. If I go to next, once again, not going to go into too much detail over here, but I'm going to go and pick the file name as SPO name because it's specific to a SharePoint data source that we ingested. The options or the fields here are optional, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm going to click next. I'm going to keep this on semantic search, and yes, there will be some additional costs to consume the semantic model, but it does make a considerable difference when engaging sort of the search endpoint versus the traditional keyword search type, right? So click next, and I'm going to save and close. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, what this has done in the back, it's just pre-populated some of the code it's going to be sending. If I change this to C#, we'll see most of this is going to look the same. There are going to be a few additions to our chat completions options object, which we're going to look at in detail today. It also has an additional key, and there is an environment variable for the search endpoint that we're going to need to connect to. I will show you how to do that when we get to the code, but that's just to show you roughly what this looks like when setting up Azure Cognitive Search as a data source. When we get back, we'll jump into the code. Okay, so in VS Code now, I've done a little bit off camera to save you guys watching me type. We'll notice very similar. We've got the OpenAI client, we've got our URL and our default credentials that we looked at, and we've got our chat completions options object with our deployment name and our messages. Now I've changed the messages, but that's fine. And finally, we've got our response, which is all the same that we had last time. We've got our message, which is our response.value.choices.message. And this is where we're going to start taking a look at the Azure extension today. So you'll notice, though, that we've got a search key and a search URL. So let's quickly take a look at where we find that. Right. So first things first, we go to Azure, and then under Azure, I will go to my AI services, and I will go to AI search. Right. You'll have this set up obviously prior to actually starting coding, and you'll notice that we've got the URL over here, right? So that is a little small. I'll try and zoom in for you guys. So we've got the URL, and then we've got keys over here. Now, these keys won't mean much to anyone, right? But it's important to know from a coding perspective that we cannot use these random test keys or the search keys that we use. We actually have to use the primary or secondary admin keys. So I'm going to just copy that and put that into my app settings file, and then we can get cracking. All right, so we're back in VS Code, and we're going to take a look at what this actual response object is going to look like now. I've put a little bit of a breakpoint on line 36 over here, so we can actually go and take a look at what the object looks like when it comes back. But right now, what it's going to do, it's basically going to say, I don't know what your policies are all about. I'm a generic AI chatbot. I've got no context on your data. I was developed by OpenAI, so I can give you general indications, but nothing serious. So what we need to do is firstly extend our chat completions options object. So I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go Azure extension options is new. That, and then what we want to pass in first is an extensions object. Now this is an I list. So if we just hover over that quickly, it's an I list of Azure chat extension configurations. Microsoft did us a massive favor with these names. But what we want to do is pass in a few of these Azure extension options extensions. The one we're going to look at obviously today is Azure Cognitive Search chat extensions option configuration. And what we want to do over there is, okay, took a few seconds to run. I'm going to step over this so we can take a look at what the message object looks like now. So we'll see a couple of things that we're familiar with, right? We've got the role, which is the assistant, and we've got content, the main policies at ASI Solutions, right? So that's starting to look like something we want to see. What we want to take a look at though is if I had to go, quickly add a new one here and say message.content. Right, it's going to come back, this is going to be a little bit small, but if we hover over that, we'll see it has a new sort of component to the content of the message, those little square brackets. Now that's the actual citations that start taking place in the content. Now the citations, like most of us are used to seeing, are actually separated from the message content. So we need a little bit of a helper method to cycle through the citations and actually update the text with our super text and those kind of things. So we're not going to worry about too much about that today. That's typically handled in the front end. It's not typically something we handle at an API level. But let's take a look at what this actually looks like now. We'll see we've got our Azure extensions context, and under that we've got another set of messages that's got another array of messages or a list, and under that we've got content as well. Now this is in JSON format. We need to parse this from JSON so we can actually have an object to work with. And what we'll do in sort of the next section of this, we'll quickly put a bit of a write line so we can take a look at what the content looks like, and then actually show you guys what these citations would look like when we actually start working with them. So yeah, we'll be doing that now. Let's quickly stop this. All right, that took a few seconds to run. We're back at our breakpoint. We're just going to step over this slowly so we can see the results as we go on. So first thing, we're expecting some normal content to be written here. I'm going to make the terminal a little bit bigger so we can see what this looks like. But you'll notice here that we've got doc2 over there. It gives us an idea about what these citations are going to look like. All right, so I'm just going to step over this and quickly get our context message. Right now, it's worth noting it's probably a good idea to write some guarding around this. We don't want to just assume that it's going to come back with that message. You don't want to just assume it's going to come back with one citation. So just be conscious when you work with this to be aware that it might return nothing. And then if I look at my content over here, it's going to come back with some weird text. And we're going to go and indent our content over there and write line, and that gives us a bit of an idea. All right, cool. So what I wanted to show you with this, and I think it's worthwhile taking a look at the citations, and you'll notice from looking at these objects why we wanted to indent them. So each one of these would have an ID and a title and a file path and URL. If you remember, when we set up the Azure Cognitive Search interface in the Azure AI Studio, it asked us for a title and an ID and a file path and those kind of things. And it is a good idea for you to start incorporating that in the production system. One of the ways we use that is to be able to not only include the actual citation in the user interface, but to actually have a link to the document. So that's proven to be quite useful. But yeah, that's basically it, right? It's pretty straightforward from that point on. Now it is, as I said, you need to, in the interface, depending on your use case, whether you can do it at an API level. I personally prefer to pass that on to the front end, for the front end to handle what it needs to do with the citations and actually parsing that document. So we're not going to go into too much detail today. But just to do a bit of a quick recap, we quickly took a look at how would we set this up in Azure AI Studio. And then we quickly set up a very simple extension on our chat messages. Now it's worth noting, if you go and scratch around on GitHub for some Microsoft examples, they don't actually do this yet. They still use a traditional approach, if you want to call it that, where they go and do the search query, use it as an embedding, and they start building up their content from there. It does return a few different results, but we are going to take a look at what does that method look like in C# in more detail as we go on. For now, we're just going to go with this. This, I think, is a nice and easy way for you to get started very quickly with connecting your data. Once you've got a search index, the rest is quite easy. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to just let that run through, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.